everyone, I'm John from Let's Talk, and today we're going to be talking about the 1981 horror film starring Dee Wallace and directed by Joe Dante, The Howling. But before we dive into that, if you're a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, film reviews, some TV reviews, and even some game reviews, we do them all here on the channel, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and you turn notifications on. So like I said, The Howling came out on March 13th, 1981, and came out the same year as another huge werewolf movie, An American Werewolf in London. And I have noticed that throughout the years that you either are a fan of An American Werewolf in London or The Howling. Now this one is directed by Joe Dante, who brought us such other classic films as Gremlins in 1984, which is my personal favorite from him, The Burbs, and another one that I really like, and I think a lot of 90s kids really like, Toy Soldiers, which I burned the hell out of that VHS as a kid, and I always see it ranked pretty low on Joe Dante lists as far as rankings go, and that's kind of unfortunate, but we're here to talk about the werewolf classic, The Howling. So this film stars Dee Wallace, who in the beginning of the film, she's a news anchor, and she's trying to help find a serial killer who's been stalking her. He's calling her on the phone, and they figure, okay, we can corner this guy, we can get him, and we'll do it all on film. But the problem is, this is Scar Dee Wallace's character, and they send her up to a resort to help her, calm her mind and, get used to the world again, because she has just been through an entirely crazy traumatic event, and little does she know, things are about to get crazier because the people who live in this quiet little mountain town are all werewolves. And I really did dig this movie. I do not think this is as good as An American Werewolf in London. I actually always prefer that film over this one. I do like The Howling, but it's very early Joe Dante, and the budget really shows. It's only got, I think, a $1.5 million budget, but it did make $17 million at the box office, so it was a hit, at least a moderate hit at the time, for a studio that didn't have to invest too much in it. But it looks like a lot of the budget did go to the special effects. Because even though, as I'm saying here, we have a brand new 4K, well, it's not brand new, it came out in October, a 4K release, the way this film is shot, you could just tell that it's made for the cheap, so even the new 4K release can't make it look perfect. But where this film does shine is in its special effects, and I think that's where it beats An American Werewolf in London. I think that the wolf effects are much better in this film, and they're much more scary. Now, I think that American Werewolf in London is more of a commercial film, whereas a lot of people know that, and they shoot a lot of it, I would say, just in a brighter light, where a lot of this, especially the big transformation scene, is done in the dark, and I really think that helps to build the fear, because I think that really just shows, and they really stay on this, and I've seen how they do this, and it's incredible. It really is just some of the best practical effects work that you'll see, and with a budget that cheap, it's truly unbelievable. And in a world like today where we get CGI that could just do this, it's not the same. Seeing it for real, with real practical effects, even if you think they look cheesy, the fact that they're real and that it's really being done, it really does help you to buy into what they're trying to show you. And what they're trying to show you is just crazy. I honestly was genuinely scared. I love the way that this film is shot. Like, some people I know aren't gonna like it. They're gonna think, oh, this looks cheap and this looks bad. I truly liked how this is shot. It kind of actually reminded me of 1984's The Terminator, especially in certain scenes with the way it's shot, with how the lights kind of have that halo around it because the exposure is open very much on the lens. I'm truly a big fan of that. There is some scenes where it's actually kind of worse, and I would have definitely not let as much light in because it felt almost dream sequency. And definitely going scene to scene, every scene kind of does feel a little different than the scene before with the lighting. And that's just budget problems for a movie that's made with a very shoestring budget for the time. You gotta cut corners somewhere, but I do think that the corners being cut are noticeable. And that's just unfortunate, but I don't think it takes away from the film. I do think that this film is decent. I don't love this film. I do think it's still fun. I'm a big fan of Joe Dante, like I said, and I think Dee Wallace is a great lead, and what a run for Dee Wallace. This came out in 1981. She had Cujo, and then in 1982, probably her most famous role ever, E.T. is the mom, which I love her in. And whatever happened to Dee Wallace? I mean, she's still around, but man, she was huge in the early 80s. And I thought she was a perfect lead, and the film really does progress well, and it's pretty violent. It's actually much more scarier than American Werewolf London, which it always gets compared to, so I always had a lot more fear of this film. Like I said, most of it's in the dark. I just think that this is a scarier film, and I think the effects are really what drives that home. And the effects are perfect. That's one thing that has stood the test of time. A lot of this film hasn't. A lot of this film has aged pretty poorly, but the effects definitely, I can honestly say, have held up awesomely. So that I can definitely give a passing grade to as far as that. There is one horrible effect, and it's at the very end of the movie, and it's a shame because it comes off such a good effect. And that's where she has, because she's been bitten and now she's a werewolf, but she seems to have a lot more control of it. And at first, we just get flashes of the eye, and her teeth just starting to change, and I was like, okay, that's cool. But the problem is they hung on that way too long, and then it cuts to her actually being a werewolf, and it looks like one of the Wookiees from the Star Wars Holiday Special that came out in the 70s. It actually looks like one of the members of that family, and if you remember that, or if you've seen that, it looks just like that. I don't understand the choice in that. I guess they were trying to say because she's a female werewolf, it's gonna look different, it's gonna look softer, and she's nicer. But the effect just did not work for me, and that's the last note of the film that we leave off on. So that kind of hurt it. So like I've said about the film, it is not a perfect werewolf film. I actually think that we're still making werewolf films now, which is awesome because I'm a big fan of that subgenre of horror. And Jim Cummings actually had one come out a few years ago called The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which I thought was another fantastic film. So they're still making werewolf films, and this came out at a time where werewolf films were at the height, at the peak of being made. I really do think that this is a good film. I can't recommend it completely, but you know what? Maybe one thing I could recommend is this new 4K. So what I got here is the new, well, it's not new, it came out last fall 2021, is the 4K Blu-ray from Scream Factory. Now, one thing to note about this is that the restoration process was actually done by Studio Canal. It wasn't done by Scream Factory. So I'm guessing, because I live in the United States, that Studio Canal distributed and made the restoration in the UK, and then the Scream Factory actually took that restoration and they released it here in the United States. Because that's what I found in my research, and it's a very good restoration. They did a fantastic job. Now, I don't want you to go into this with huge expectations because, like I said in the film review part, this film did come out in 1981. It has very dated effects. It was made with a very low budget, and that means that the source material is not the greatest. Yes, it's shot on film. It also depends on where they were shooting, how the lighting was, and exactly how the effects and everything were, and how that plays a part into how a film is made. This is not made on a big 1981 budget. So the restoration is done extremely well, but there's also only so much they can do. So don't go into this thinking you're going to get your mind blown and you're going to get an amazing 4K that's going to change your entire perspective of The Howling. That is just not going to happen. Actually, I appreciated that because it did feel like I was still watching a film from the 80s. A lot of times with these restorations, you kind of lose that touch of when you used to watch a film on VHS and it kind of had that faded look and it felt like you were watching something from the 80s, whereas now they just wipe all that clean and it feels like you're there and they just shot this film yesterday. This definitely didn't feel like that. And as I noted earlier, like with the exposure of the lighting coming in, sometimes that would overwhelm the scene. There was one scene in particular where it felt like the dream sequence in A Christmas Story where there was just so much lighting. It felt like almost like soap opera-ish, and it was only in one scene, and it was just a very strange choice. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but that scene was actually pretty hard to look at. But then there are some scenes where it's so clear and it looks beautiful and you can just see every line in people's face. So it really was a scene-to-scene kind of like way of like saying like this scene looks great, this scene kind of looks kind of muddy, this scene looks good again, and it really was just scene to scene as far as quality of picture goes. So I mean, your mileage with that is definitely going to vary. I can't say that some people are going to love this, some people are going to hate this, but I can just honestly say that I think that the restoration was done extremely well. I just don't think it can be done to what people might be expecting. That was my feeling watching it. You know, your feeling might be different, but I would still say it's a very good restoration. One more note on the visuals, there is HDR10 and Dolby Vision on here, which I do think helps. The HDR really did get the darks as dark as they could possibly be, but like I said, the HDR is not going to clean up a 41-year-old film. Unfortunately, I wish it could. It does the best work it could possibly do with the source material, in my opinion. Now the audio, it is a DTS HD master audio track on here. It comes with the original 2.0, but it also has a 5.1 surround sound on there, which is what I listened to it in, and I think it was really good. I don't think it was the best. You know, you could probably listen to it in the studio, in the stereo 2.0, and I don't think it's that much worse than what the 5.1 is. It didn't feel like it was the best mixed track, but I thought it was still pretty good. I had some fun with it. I actually was really testing out all my speakers, and some of the horror scenes really did get the bass whooping, which is, I have no problem with that. I thought it was really good. So the audio is passable, not the greatest, but definitely not by far the worst that we've ever gotten. Now let's move on to the extras. So there is a lot of extras on both discs. The first disc is the 4K Blu-ray. That's only got some audio commentary tracks on there, some with Dee Wallace and Joe Dante, which is really cool. There's a bunch of them. They actually get those audio commentary tracks on both discs. And then if you go to the second disc, that's where most of your extras are. That's where you get some retrospectives, some interviews, some outtakes, and some deleted scenes. And there are a ton between both discs. And this is what happens when you get stuff from like Studio Canal or Scream Factory in comparison to regular studio releases, which will always be limited on extras. This is fans making the film who always want to find every little bit of extra they can, and really helps the collector, like myself, go out and buy it, because that's what's going to intrigue me. If I could just go buy a Blu-ray if there's nothing else on here, because I didn't think that the quality and visuals and audio really drove me to buy this. But the extras will, because this is something where I can get another few hours out of this film and it makes my purchase feel a lot better. I could definitely honestly say it from an extra standpoint. It's a high recommendation from me. There's a lot on here. And just before we get out of here, as far as quality of the product, you get another Scream Factory. They usually have the same slipcover with the silver lining up top that I really do enjoy, with that matte finish, so it's not too glossy. I would say semi-gloss is the best way to describe this, because it does still have some reflection of light on it. You get that, and you get the Blu-ray, no digital code. That's for most Arrow Video, Scream Factory, Studio Canal, Criterion releases. Only the studios usually throw out the digital code. But overall, if you are a fan of The Howling, and I know it has a huge cult following, I could definitely recommend this Scream Factory release. I think you're going to be happy. I think that is where this is mostly shot for. I think this is mostly made for fans of The Howling. If you've never seen The Howling, I don't imagine you're going to love it. It's a very dated film, and this is not going to make that much better for you. But if you are a fan of The Howling, I can highly recommend this. I think you're going to really enjoy this. If I was going to rate the entire product, including film, audio, visuals, extras, and the quality of the disc itself and the packaging, I'm going to say that this is a solid 7.5 out of 10. And as always, guys, thanks for joining me here on another episode of Let's Talk. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and you tell all your friends.